Breaking news right now, President Trump telling CNN Cuba is going to fall, quote, pretty soon. CNN's chief political correspondent and anchor Dana Bash spoke to the president over the phone just moments ago. It was a wide-ranging conversation, and Dana's joining us right now on the phone. Update our viewers, Dana. How did it go?
Hi, Wolf. Well, it was wide-ranging. It was very brief, but we certainly packed a lot in. Let's just start with Iran. He said he would give the war so far, from the U.S. perspective, a 12, maybe 15 on a scale of 10. He said that he believes the U.S. is doing very well militarily, better than anyone could have dreamed. He said, I rebuilt the military in my first term. As you know, I'm using it in my second term. Iran is not the same country as it was a week ago. A week ago, they were very powerful, and now they have indeed been neutered. So the question, one of the many questions, as you know, Wolf, is who's next? Who's going to be the leader? He connected it to Venezuela, as we've now heard him do in the last couple of days. But I asked him, well, okay, but in Venezuela, you had Delcy Rodriguez, and he said she's doing a very good job. I said, well, would you be okay with a religious leader in Iran? And he said the answer is yes. It doesn't necessarily have to be a democratic leader in Iran. It just has to be somebody who treats the U.S. and Israel fairly, as well as people in the countries in the rest of the Middle East. Wolf.
And it was interesting, while you spoke at length with him about what's going on in Iran, Dana, he also told you he's got his eye on Cuba. Cuba. Explain.
He brought up Cuba unsolicited, Wolf. He said Cuba's going to fall pretty soon, by the way. Cuba is going to fall, too. They want to make a deal so badly. They want to make a deal, and so I'm going to put Marco, meaning Rubio, over there, and we'll see how that works out. We're pretty focused on this one right now, and that part he was talking about Iran. We've got plenty of time, but Cuba's ready after 50 years.
Interesting. Gas prices, as we all now know, are up some 34 cents a gallon in just a week. What did he say about that? He
said, that's all right. It'll be a short-term time. It'll go way down quickly. He said they're up a little bit, not much, but it'll drop down to record lows. I asked him if that means that he thinks that they've got the Strait of Hormuz figured out. And his answer was, yes, they think that they've knocked ships. He said big ones. So he's very bullish on all of this, including and especially, I think, not just militarily, but especially the idea on Iran of gas prices being temporary, because you know, Wolf, when it comes to the economy, the president is laser focused on gas prices, has been from the beginning, but also just the notion that it would be okay with him to have a leader in Iran that's not a democratic leader and perhaps still part of the religious leadership that is the Iran. He didn't say part of the Iranian regime, but it's okay with him to be a religious leader still, to have a religious leader heading up Iran.
And you also got into some
Saudis are watching, and of course, as the clock ticks, questions over their energy production. What to do with all that oil if they can't export it? There is a clock running on these things.
Nick Robertson in Riyadh. Stand by, if you will. We also have Jeremy Diamond standing by in the Israel-Lebanon border. Jeremy, if you could hang on just a second, because we have Dana Bash with us right now. And Dana, I understand you just got off the phone with President Trump. What did you hear from him?
I did, John. Good morning. He just broadly speaking, he insists that on a scale of 10, with 10 being the best, he thinks that the war is, I would say, at 12, maybe 15. He said that the U.S. Is doing very well militarily, quote, better than anybody could have dreamed. He said that he rebuilt the military in his first term. He's using it in his second. And then he quickly turned to Cuba. He said, without being asked, Cuba is going to fall pretty soon, by the way, but Cuba is going to fall. They want to make a deal so badly. And I asked, how so? He said, they want to make a deal, so I'm going to put Marco over there, and we'll see how that works. But we're really focused on this one now, meaning Iran. We've got plenty of time on Cuba. Just more quickly on, obviously, what's going on with Iran. And you were just talking about this with our colleagues in the region. I asked about rising gas prices, and he said, that's all right. It'll be short term. It'll go way down very quickly. And I said, well, they're pretty high now. And he said, no, they're not. They're up a little bit, not much, but it'll drop to record lows. And so I asked, well, does this mean that you're going to figure out the Strait of Hormuz soon? Again, something you were just talking about. He said, quote, it's already figured out. We've knocked their Navy because, you know, when you knock out the Navy, they can't do what they wanted to be able to do. The Navy is almost, he said, we just hit the 25 mark. Can you imagine that? Big ones. 25 ships are down. We're doing very well. And, John, just real quick, I also asked about the Gulf countries being hit. He said they're doing unbelievable and they're fighting. They, meaning Iran, made a terrible mistake when they attacked them. The UAE is freezing the assets, and they have the assets, all of them, and they got hit enough where they were going to freeze them. They're brave people. I do want to tell you one other important thing that he discussed with me, and it was about a 5-minute discussion. And that is who the next leader of Iran will be. You know, he told our colleague, Barack Ravid, yesterday that he had like 3 people in mind and that he wants to pick the person. And I asked him about that. I said, how's that going to work? And he said, it's going to work very easily. It's going to work like it did in Venezuela. We have a wonderful leader there. She's doing a fantastic job, and it's going to work like that. And I said, okay, but are you okay with having a religious leader again, a different Ayatollah? And he said, well, I may be. I mean, it depends on who the person is. I don't mind religious leaders. I deal with a lot of religious leaders, and they're fantastic. And then he went on to say, I'm saying there has to be a leader that's going to be fair and just, do a great job, treat the United States and Israel well, and treat other countries in the Middle East. They're all our partners. So that was the gist of our discussion on the war and where he thinks they are and what the impact is having when it comes to gas prices.
That's a whole lot of information packed into one 5-minute conversation, Dana. Particularly notable, the idea that he said of rising gas prices, the highest they've ever been under a President Trump. He said that's okay and suggested they will go down soon. The other thing about the idea, and I think we can call it regime change, I guess I'll put it in quotes.
After spending most of the last year, we now know, secretly masterminding the invasion of Venezuela and the capture of Nicolas Maduro was the closest Marco Rubio could come right now to delivering on the dream that will never die. It is the dream of some Cuban Americans like Marco Rubio and other right-wing extremists in the United States, the dream many of them have held since April of 1961, when a similarly planned invasion of Cuba failed at the Bay of Pigs. 87 days into John F. Kennedy's presidency, the CIA executed a long-planned invasion of Cuba, a plan that began before the Kennedy presidency. The invasion was at the Bay of Pigs, and it was defeated by Fidel Castro, who personally commanded the Cuban Defense Forces at the point of battle. It was a full humiliation for the CIA and the American military, and for President Kennedy, who considered it the worst mistake of his presidency, which it most certainly was. It was a stain on American foreign policy that Americans forgot, but the world did not, especially Latin America. This is the way it was supposed to go. The Bay of Pigs was supposed to go the way Marco Rubio and the team executed the plan in Venezuela. Donald Trump can be presumed to be lying about every reason he gives for everything he does, having been documented by the Washington Post for pathologically telling over 30,000 lies during his first term as president. Everyone who can think has known from the start that Donald Trump's missile attacks on small boats with outboard motors off the coast of Venezuela were not about stopping drug trafficking. None of those boats could have reached the United States. They are all too small and don't carry enough fuel and could only reach the closest island where they could have easily been intercepted. And now many observers feel vindicated in the belief that it was never about the drugs in those missile strikes because Donald Trump has now said it's about the oil. But what if he's lying again?
The argument being made is that Donald Trump is shifting attention toward another potential foreign confirmation, especially involving Cuba. Critics claim this kind of rhetoric is meant to divert attention from domestic controversies and policy failures. They argue that what potential pressure goes at home, raising the prospect of a new geopolitical conflict, can redirect public focus. Recent comments from Trump about Cuba have fueled this debate. He has suggested the possibility of a friendly takeover of the island and said the country could be close to political change, although he did not explain exactly what such a move would involve. Some reports also note that Trump indicated U.S. attention shift Cuba after other conflicts are resolved. These remarks have led to speculation about whether the administration is considering stronger pressure, diplomatic efforts, or other forms of intervention. Critics connect this rhetoric to broader tensions following conflicts involving Iran and developments in Venezuela. They argue military action or aggressive foreign policy decisions can have economic consequences, such as rising oil prices, and create additional political problems domestically. In that interpretation, taking about new geopolitical targets becomes part of the strategy to shift the narrative away from those consequences. However, scholars of the administration often interpret these comments differentially. They argue that Trump's statements are part of a broader strategy to pressure governments in the Western Hemisphere and expand U.S. influence in the region. News reports indicate that his administration has been discussing regional security initiatives and potential negotiations involving Cuba. Overall, the debate reflects two competing interpretations. Critics see the rhetoric as a distraction from domestic issues, while supporters frame it as part of a larger geopolitical strategy aimed at reshaping U.S. influence in Latin America.